Randall until dawn. I think the next most constructive thing to do is to invite the audience, those who would like to ask questions of Randall and of myself. Please come and do so. Please ask us questions. I think Mercury definitely is doing a secret retrograde. Okay.
Thanks, y'all, for this really pertinent and highly wonderful day, really.
Oh, there you are.
Because, you know, every day I wonder about this stuff, and one of the things that could bring, that has been discussed recently in the kind of YouTube channels that I've been watching, one of which is Rex Bear, but is this idea of us being in a kind of a trinary sun system, and
a binary. I'm familiar with the notion of a binary, that there's another star that our sun is in orbit around, or that they're locked into a binary system together. Yeah, a friend of mine, Walter Cruttenden, who runs the Conference on Precession and Ancient Knowledge, has advocated that idea for a long time, and actually he thinks our companion star is Sirius, that we're in orbit around Sirius.
it's fascinating.
Fascinating, yes.
And lately, the binary has turned into a trinary idea.
Yeah. Well, Sirius is already a binary, in fact.
I see, okay.
Yeah.
So that would explain that. And that would be bringing in on their tail debris and comets. Yeah. And in fact, the idea being that just going around the sun in a perihelion would be close enough to planet Earth to grab onto the magnetic mid-Atlantic ridge, basically, and pull it enough. So comets.
Interesting thought. I'm going to stop you there because I know Randall has thoughts on the mid-Atlantic ridge and the lifting of the weight from the ice sheets and what may have happened at the mid-Atlantic ridge. Randall, do you have a comment on that?
Sure. Well, in geology, there's a concept called isostasy, which is the vertical movement of the Earth's crust. We know from deglaciation of the area around Hudson Bay that that section of the North American craton, as it's called, has risen as much as 1,500 feet since the ice was removed. Right? It's the same concept. Imagine you're sitting on a soft chair right now, and as you're sitting there, your derriere is compressing the cushion, the seat that you're sitting on. And when you get up, like I'm sitting on this right now, when I get up, it'll spring back. That's basically isostasy. But when you transfer all of this weight from the continental landmass back into the ocean bottoms respond in a similar fashion. Because you're now, when you increase, I actually did a calculation at one point to calculate just how much additional weight was transferred into the Atlantic Ocean basin by our 400-foot sea level rise, and it's considerable. I don't remember the number, but it was a lot of zeros. But there is empirical evidence to suggest that there was a major subsidence of the Atlantic Ocean basin that concentrated along the mid-Atlantic ridge. It may have been up to several thousand feet or more. So if you look at maps, bathymetric maps of the ocean floor, you will see like a big suture line running up the middle of the Atlantic Ocean basin, and this is the mid-Atlantic ridge. It's some of the thinnest crust on Earth. And if you go into an ice age, you're releasing weight. So I'm going to have to set this down for just a minute, so I will speak loud.
But I want to, we need to bring on the next questioner. So
okay.
You have to cut to the
Think of a beach ball. Squeeze it this way, it expands this way, right? Squeeze it this way, it expands this way. The Earth is doing the same sort of a thing. So the water goes into the ocean basin, and you think of it as like a hinge line at the mid-Atlantic ridge. And I would suggest that that's what we should look at if we're going to try to demonstrate the existence of an Atlantis.
Of an Atlantis, that the mid-Atlantic ridge could have...
Yes. Oh, it certainly did.
Yeah. So that was a good and helpful question. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next, please.
Graham, Randall, how you doing?
Great.
I love Magicians of the Gods, and I can't wait to read your next book.
Thank you.
I saw in Randall, in one of your slides, you showed a area of effect from the comet Terry strikes. It was from Canada that extended down into South America and into Europe, and then there was one down
Earlier
in
today,
Australia.
you mean?
Yeah. Could you give like a blow-by-blow account of how you think this happened? I'm thinking of like Shoemaker-Levy, as the comet came in, it broke into pieces. Do you think that was what was going on? And
In terms of a cometary impact, I think that's the most likely scenario. In fact, I think whatever, was going on, in the universe, we were kind of given a glimpse of these possibilities with Shoemaker-Levy 9, because we witnessed a comet fragmenting into 21 pieces, a single nucleus torn apart by the intense gravity field of Jupiter, and we were able to watch those 21 pieces circle the sun, and one after another, to impact the Jovian atmosphere. And since there were discovered many crater chains on other planetary bodies on the moon and so forth, it suggests that this maybe isn't that uncommon for a comet nucleus to fragment and for those pieces, multiple pieces, to impact. And I would think, and one of the things that I've been doing in these travels around the West and up in Canada, particularly going up under the ice sheet itself, where the ice sheet would have been, is following the patterns of meltwater erosion. And what you do see there is that the normal models of glacier recession would be the margin of the glacier melts and the glacier recedes back. What we see when we look at the disposition of the melting of the ice sheet is that there are actually melting epicenters that are hundreds of miles up from the margin of the ice sheet. It didn't melt from the margin backwards. There were huge melting episodes that occurred, 500, 600, 800 miles back from the margin. And now the documentation shows that there were enormous floods under the ice sheet. Enormous floods that created these vast drumlin fields, which are, I said earlier, that when you get into these studies, a hill is not just a hill anymore. A drumlin is a good example of a hill. It's not just a hill. Let's move on.
Yeah, we have to keep it tight.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question. Yes, please.
Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for your time and your wisdom and your knowledge, but my question is for Graham about Japan, Yonaguni.
Yeah.
Has everyone considered that might have been an ancient quarry?
I think it's an excellent suggestion. Yonaguni is a controversial underwater structure off the coast of the most southwestern of the Japanese islands, which is called Yonaguni. And I've dived on that structure somewhere north of 200 times. And so has Santha. Santha and I dived that structure together. In fact, we actually learned to dive in order to dive that structure. And we had, fortunately, the benefit of being trained by Japanese divers. And the Japanese, when they do something well, they do it really well. And it was incredibly helpful. I think that your suggestion that outcrop may have been a quarry is actually a very good one. I think it undoubtedly was cut by human beings.
Yeah, especially the two slabs that we see fall down.
Yeah.
And then the face, and it almost kind of matches some of Peru.
Yes, it does.
Quarries, we see the face on the mountain.
It does.
Same cuts, just not underwater.
Yeah, that's right. It's a good thought. And again, this is another one of these mysteries that needs further investigation and is being, brushed aside right now. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you both for presenting. My comments come from an indigenous ancestry,
Okay.
and it could be addressed maybe by both of you. There's a concept known as the sun beyond the sun, and it is told through oral traditions that I have had some exposure to. And also from those same indigenous people, they talk about surviving the passage of the sun beyond the sun, and in that you must be above what we call the glass line. And this is this line you show in your slides, Randall, where there's that black line in the glass. They call that the glass line in my ancestry. And I just wanted to know if either of the concepts that you've presented or something like a massive gravitational force by another sun or object that does get, for whatever reason, close to us, could explain the fossils of the whale pods and other sea life that we find down the high level, very high in high elevations, down the whole, I think, Chilean and Peruvian deserts of South America. Thank you.
Well, if I understood the question, the sun behind the sun is a very interesting concept. It kind of really has a rich heritage in various occult traditions. And in the Masonic tradition, it generally refers to Sirius. And interesting, a quick aside about Sirius, it has a proper stellar motion of 1 arcsecond per year. Now, which is interesting because if you think about the sun and our relationship to the sun, we're orbiting the sun, right? And the sun appears to be moving very close to 1 degree per day. But when you see the sun moving against the backdrop of fixed stars, say 1 degree per day, it's not the sun moving, it's the earth moving relative to the sun. And if you look at the 1 arcsecond of motion of Sirius, and we thought of it in the same way, it could possibly be that our solar system is moving relative to Sirius. And it's interesting that 1 arcsecond per year would then imply an orbital period of 1,296,000 years, which is the length of the Treta Yuga in the Vedic tradition, precisely. That's of course all speculation, but there is a rich tradition about the sun behind the sun. I don't know if we could say that that had anything necessarily to do with those particular fossils or not, but certainly that's just more evidence of how extreme the changes have been, because what was once under the ocean might now be a mile above sea level.
Please, go ahead.
Thank you. I've really learned a lot today, and I had a couple of related questions. There are certain stones that show the reversal of the magnetic field of the planet. You can actually trace the flips of the magnetic field in some of these stones. And I'm wondering if anyone has looked at them to see if there was a weakening or a reversal of the magnetic field during the time of the Younger Dryas to sort of add to the theory of the sun, basically roasting everything. And has anyone looked at any geological evidence from stones from the moon or Mars to see if there is any kind of similar phenomenon with them? If there's been I know the moon doesn't really have a magnetic field, and Mars has a small one, but that, or just evidence of, like we saw on the moon, those glass, those vitroliths or whatever, if they've seen any evidence of that from other places where we've gotten physical
Any thoughts on
material.
that?
Well, we do know that we find lunar rocks on Earth that were a result of impacts on the moon that have blasted rocks into orbit that have eventually found their way to Earth. We know that. I mean, astronomers have found those, identified them as lunar material. And there's some interesting studies suggesting there might be a correlation between large-scale impacts and magnetic field fluctuations, if not reversals. And that's one of the things I'm kind of looking into right now to see what there could be, if there is evidence that the magnetic field went through some kind of changes. And I've seen some stuff that would suggest that there wasn't a reversal, but there was definitely fluctuations in the Earth's magnetic field associated with the transition.
I think you've raised a good point, and I think it's something worth looking into further. I've also come across material on magnetic reversal at that time, and the suggestion that we're heading for another one. We're all told that these magnetic reversals are really nothing to worry about, but I'm not so sure about that. Everything about this planet is beautiful and perfect and meant to be, and that magnetic field is there for a reason. I think you've indicated a good area for further research in this field. Please go ahead.
Thanks both of you for all your work and your trips across the Americas. There's been talk or allusion to, and I've read channel messages about possible ancient civilizations maybe destroying themselves and a new one starts over. And is there any idea about the Younger Dryas, and perhaps it seemed like there were almost two cataclysmic events at the start of it and the end?
Beginning and the end. Both were cataclysmic. The onset of the Younger Dryas was a cataclysm of humongous proportions, and the end of the Younger Dryas was a cataclysm of humongous proportions.
And it seems like a huge coincidence in just 12 or so hundred years to have the Earth undergo
Yeah.
two cataclysmic events when there had been tens of thousands of years, it seems like, without.
Yeah, unless there was some connection between those two events.
Yeah, I guess that's my question.
Some specific connection. One thing you talked about human behavior. One aspect of Plato's story of Atlantis, and Plato is our only source for Atlantis, as a matter of fact. All other sources are secondary, the only surviving source, is that he speaks of a once great and formidable civilization, which was dedicated to positive pursuits, which gradually became corrupt and evil, that darkness entered in. And one phrase sticks in my mind from Plato is that they ceased to wear their prosperity with moderation. They became arrogant, they became cruel, and the universe slapped them down. That's how Plato tells the story, and I have to say, when I hear that story and I look at our civilization today, I wonder if we are ticking all the boxes of the next lost civilization. We don't understand the mystery of life and the universe. We don't know actually to what extent human behavior and human thoughts are influencing our cosmic environment. We should not rule any of that out. The ancient mythology, all ancient mythology, speaking of giant global cataclysms, indicates a role for humanity in that. Our behavior is part of it. Maybe it doesn't cause it to happen, but maybe it makes us negligent of stuff that we should do to pay attention. There's profound lessons in all of that. Yeah. Go ahead.
Hey, you guys already know I love you, and
Thank you.
appreciate you more than I can express.
Thank you.
So I got 3 questions. You can pick which one you want. Number 1, the recent correlations that have been made, whether or not you've heard of them, between the Eye of Africa and the city of Poseidon or Atlantis in Mauritania. Pretty interesting stuff. Number 2, Mario build reps, his work on pole shifts. Don't know if you know about that.
Don't know.
And number 3, you need to, seriously, this big stuff y'all will love. Mario build reps, remember that. And 3, the Grand Canyon.
Would you email me that?
I will, absolutely. And 3, the Grand Canyon. You know, we spent some time there last year, and just looking at that thing, Randall, you've been talking about these rivers that have these massive oversized beds, and you have this little trickle of a stream in the middle of it, and you go, oh, this took 20 million years, and it makes perfect sense that this little trickle of a stream could create this massive thing that there's nothing like it in the world. And then you talk about antecedent impact, you know, when you have something smashing into one part of the planet, and you have this shock wave that passes through and creates, you know, some massive ripple impact on the other side. And when we sat on the edge of the Grand Canyon and looked at these, there's no other word besides cataclysmic, these cataclysmic features that were going on. Do you guys have any input on some cataclysmic origins of the Grand Canyon? So those are the 3 you think you think.
Well, let me put it this way. I've seen 2 extreme models. One is the standard academic model that it's been slowly downcut by the modern flow of the Colorado River. The other extreme is that it all happened in one biblical, Noah's flood, right? I think the reality is that you have to look at the Colorado Plateau, which 10 to 20 million years ago was basically at sea level. It has risen, a mile or more above sea level. And the erosion that you see over the entire Colorado Plateau is extreme. The early geologists looking at that called it the Great Denudation, right? And if you go up into the canyon lands, you go over into even the San Juan Basin, you go over to, Arches area, the Green River area, the whole of Colorado Plateau drains through the Grand Canyon. My take on it is that the Grand Canyon is probably primarily the result of episodic downcutting on a catastrophic level that likely occurred each time the Earth has transitioned into and out of these ice ages. If you remember the graph I showed this morning with these enormous spikes, right? What it appears is that we go through a period of what would be considered normal, uniform type change, the type in which art history is bracketed, but then there are these short periods, discontinuous periods, where it really everything the shit hits the fan, so to speak, for a very short period of time. When it settles out, there's a new order of nature. But one of the things that apparently happens is that extreme pluvial events are associated with these transitions. By that I mean intense rainfalls, right? So if you have an intense rainfall over the Colorado Plateau, all of that rain is going to ultimately flow down through the Grand Canyon. So I would look at the Grand Canyon as being probably cut over the last 2.5 roughly million years of the Pleistocene, which is characterized by this oscillating back and forth between glacial and interglacial ages. That would be my take on it. So not one big catastrophe.
You don't think it's connected to the Younger Dryas event?
I do not think it's connected. No, well, let me put it this way. I do think that probably the last episode of major downcutting could have occurred then, because there is evidence all over non-glaciated North America of extreme rainfall that's dated to that Younger Dryas.
Well,
and that certainly would have...
Very erratic all around there as well.
Yeah. Oh,
we need to bring on the next question. Thank you very much. Please go ahead.
Hello, thank you. I first want to thank you for such a thought-provoking presentation from both of you. And I know that this evening we've been speaking a lot about climate change and the catastrophes that have been happening in the past. But my question has more relation to what's happening now. And I'm very curious about what is your thoughts on geoengineering in the case of climate and HARP, for example, and how, knowing what's been going on in the past, how can we differentiate for the catastrophes that are going to come in the present and the future? What will be man-made and how can we be the natural?
That's another really good thought. I tell you, if I may begin with that, I think that our species, human species, we're incredibly resourceful. When I look back at the history of humanity, the prehistory of humanity, the journeys, the adventures, the discoveries that our ancestors made, I mean, modern exploration is nothing in comparison with what they've done. Universe is a big place, it's full of power, but we are part of that. And humanity working together, expressing love for one another, not divided by artificial barriers, not separated by false hatreds, but sharing our common predicament and our common hopes. I think we can work with the universe to make things work out. I think we can stop doing really stupid, nasty, vile, wicked, evil stuff to each other and to the planet. And you know what? Everything is going to get better if we do that. I don't think we need to make machines to intervene in the climate, and that really worries me. The solution is never a machine, not to problems like this. The solution is our consciousness. It's what human beings do and how we live in the world that matters. And if we change that, if somehow this magical transfer, because all human beings are filled with love. I know that human beings show hatred. It's part of it, but we need to dim down the hatred and raise up the love. And if that happens, if that happens, we don't need HARP or any of that stuff. We're going to work with the universe and make things right.
I agree with you, but I think that we're dealing also with in a case where, at least I know from my generation, we feel very helpless in seeing that we live in a world where everything is, you don't know what is true, what is not. And so you don't know if the hurricane is coming, it's man-made, or is it true by nature. And so, for me it's more like, what are your thoughts on what HARP has done already to how we see climate and the debates that we're having?
Yeah, it's not a subject of my expertise. I'm not sure how much interfering is going on in the weather. I have concerns about conspiracy theories. I don't want to live with fear. I don't want to live with feeling that all sorts of evil machinations are going on and people are sending hurricanes my way. I don't want to think those thoughts. But maybe I should, maybe it's important to get into that. But I still come back to the feeling that the solution to all our problems lies in a shift of consciousness, not in any kind of machine. That's another reason why I really can't bear this whole notion of transhumanism, which is to turn us into machines. No, we should never, never, never do that. There is no purpose. There is no purpose to do that. there's no purpose, in endlessly extending life so that we live for hundreds and hundreds of years. We already have a mechanism to do that. It's called reincarnation.
Yeah, first a fun fact. The James Smithsonian, who was the founding donor for the Smithsonian Institution, never set foot on North America. The Smithsonian Institution seems to be a gatekeeper of American natural history, and I wonder, what's the motivation for instance, denying the knowledge of the skeletons for 7-foot humans?
The Smithsonian really is a, sorry, I won't take up too much time, but the Smithsonian really is a very puzzling institution, very peculiar in every way. It has certainly covered up the truth. It did have an agenda. It absolutely had an agenda to make Native Americans look relatively recent arrivals in the Americas, when in fact they're extremely ancient arrivals in the Americas. For some reason, the Smithsonian had that agenda. But oddly enough, you know, you have people in the Smithsonian today who are advocating really quite radical theories. So I don't know what to make of it, really. Go ahead.
Gentlemen, my name is Joshua Randall Graham. Thank you so much for your brilliance. This question is for Graham. Just with regards to your book that you just finished, I'm just curious as to what was the most surprising thing that you found in your research here in the Americas.
I think the most surprising thing by far is that up till now, and this was what I was taught at school as well, America has been regarded as a sideline in the story of human civilization. The whole story of human civilization happened in the old world. That's what we've all been brought up believing. And the revelation to me is that that is complete and utter nonsense. And we have to put the Americas right back in the center of the picture. And until we do so, we are never going to understand our past. It's like just a huge slice of our past has been taken away from us, partly because of cataclysms and partly because of bad, awfully bad archaeology. So, I sense it's late. Randall, the last word is yours.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I just want to affirm everything that Graham said, and I really am a firm believer in what can happen when people work together. You know, because having run a business and had a diverse, broad spectrum of people from all kinds of backgrounds, that we all come together and we all have this objective. We're going to build this project, right? And we don't really care about our race, we don't care about our religion. What we care about is getting this job done. Right, and if we can just kind of get that attitude that we've got a job to do here on this planet, and part of it is actually figuring out what that job is, but yeah, if we can get into that mindset that, you know, there are things that transcend our differences by far. You know, I basically, yeah, when I work, I've got, you know, people that work for me who are from different parts of the world. I've got clients that are of a diverse spectrum. My subcontractors, when we've got a project, we're all focused on getting that job finished. And we set aside our differences, and when we can successfully set aside our differences, the job gets done. It gets done, yeah. And it's successful. So that's kind of my take. I just figured that at some point, I think that the universe, the cosmos, is going to give us a little flick on the ear and say, look, here's kind of what you've got to be doing in order to be successful in the next century or two or three or whatever the case is. I just hope it can be something that's a little bit more peaceful than violent. But you know, there was a teacher early part of the 20th century named Gurdjieff who said that, you know, all meaningful change typically only comes about after a shock to the system. We may be in for a shock of some kind, you know, just enough to awaken us. For example, if Tunguska type event happened again, the thing that happened in 1908, only this time it happened over a populated area, and we realized we are part of the bigger environment, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
And we are going to need to rise to the occasion and realize that once we understand we're part of this bigger environment, then the differences between us that divide us appear to be pretty petty and trivial.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's a great note to end on. We are all one family. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Two amazing souls, and we again want to honor all of these people that are revealing the shadow past and letting us understand our true history. One more applause, please, for these remarkable. So we will begin tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock with the tribute to John Anthony West. Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you. It's been wonderful to see you all again. Thank you.